So we got here a 2001 S600 W220 chassis. This is the version with the M137 engine. This is a Distronic upgrade I've been working on this weekend. So here you have the Distronic sensor. This is something I got off of eBay. I think it came out of a CL600. Got the Distronic harness right here. The specific harness for this car was one that was only used for a couple of years, and it's not really available anymore. So this is actually an R230 harness, because these are much easier to get, but it's got pretty much the same cable output as the W600 or the S600, so not too much of a problem. I routed it underneath the headlight to make sure that everything went around properly. There was a little bit of extra slack here. It's just sort of, loosely dangled under here. If you go around to the sides, see I routed the cable underneath this track here. This is more of the cable right here. It goes right into the right-hand SAM box and plugs into the second from the last fuse position right here. Then it goes right through the firewall into the passenger compartment. There is a rubber grommet. You can see it right there in the middle of the screen. That's normally used by the R230 chassis. It's not necessary here because there's actually already a sort of a split grommet installed, and it's in the wrong spot anyway to kind of fit neatly within the trace here, or the race. Going around to the side, show you what else we did to get everything hooked up. Show you this before we button it up. So this is the actual Distronic ECU connected. We got the two connectors and the coaxial cable as well going out to the sensor. Over here is where it actually connected into the engine control unit, into the CAN bus. This is for CAN C right here. I got just a couple of solder joints. This is the original wiring harness, the R230 wiring harness, and then this CAN bus wire here actually goes to the right hand seatbelt tensioner. But normally what you do is you want to route all the way over to the driver's side and connect to the sort of the central CAN bus connection over on that side. But rather than doing that and tearing up the carpet on both sides, I just went ahead and just wired it right into the seatbelt tensioner instead. You also need to connect to the diagnostic wire. So there's a pink wire on the R230. This kind of jacketed wire here is supposed to be pink. It's probably hard to see on the camera. And then this blue diagnostic wire also goes to the seatbelt tensioner. So basically all the wiring you need is right here in the passenger side, which is really convenient. So it basically means all you really have to do is take out this kick panel, plug everything in, do a little bit of soldering and some shrink wrapping, and you're good to go. So programming it was a little bit interesting because there's not a whole lot of documentation on how to do it. Here I've got a star diagnostic system, and it's plugged into the car right now. I'd say before you do any kind of programming, something that's really smart to do, and I kind of learned this over time, is put your car on a battery charger. I got this nice DeWalt unit here, 30 amps. The car uses 18 amps, just sitting idle without even the engine running. So it will definitely be a big battery draw if you try to do any of this programming with just the battery, or you have to leave the engine running. So having one of these is really nice because it lets me keep the garage closed and not have to basically roast while I'm in a hot garage. Let's go ahead and go over here and take a look at some of the things we did for programming this device with the 2001 version. So one of the first things you'll notice, so this is Star Diagnostics, I've got a wireless connection to the unit, is you'll need to update the engine electronics. This one has an ME I'm just going to turn off this light real quick. Off. So this one has ME27, which is one I'd never seen before. All the others cars I've got have ME28 in them, but one of the first things you need to do when you start coding for this is, I'll go ahead and press F3, is download all the adaptation data. If you don't do this, you'll get lots of funny errors, and it won't be really clear what's going on. So this is a star diagnostic in development mode. You'll definitely need that to actually code everything. We'll go ahead and go into development data, and you want to go to control unit adaptations. And the first thing you want to do, most people want to just go right into variant coding and fix things up, but everything will actually be wrong if you try to choose that. The first thing you need to do is read coding and transfer download data. I know when you go into variant code it looks like it's reading the data, but it really doesn't work. So do this first. So just select read, say it's okay. Normally you use this screen to put a new engine ECU in. We're not going to do that, but we're just going to do half the procedure and then abort halfway through. So basically you wait for it to read all the data. It takes about a minute or so. And when it's done, we're going to have to toggle the ignition. While we're waiting for that, something else I normally do, because I use wireless for the connection to the multiplexer. I've got a Wi-Fi router out here. It makes it a lot more reliable to keep that connection up than if you were to have like a router further away. The radio on the multiplexer is not really that good, so it disconnects sort of at the slightest whim. So once it says coding has been read, we'll go in and toggle the ignition. So let's walk in here real quick, flip it off, turn it back on again, and let's go back over here, and let's say it's going to be transferred to a new control unit. No, we're not going to actually do that right now, so we're going to hit F4. Let's see, there we go, and it should dump us back into the previous screen. So now you want to go not to variant coding again. Actually, you do want to go to variant code. I take it back. Go to variant code, and the first thing you want to do is the code of your strings. The reason why you want to do this is because by default the ME27 is not actually set up for any particular usage. That was kind of a surprise to me. But let's go ahead and take a look at what I mean by that. So I'm going to go ahead and select it. It'll say that something's invalid. That's okay. When you first enter this screen on kind of a virgin car, none of these fields will actually be filled in. I happen to have this is a W220 that looks like a V, but that's German for you. That's got the 5.8 liter engine in it. So we'll go ahead and select the correct version from here. So from this screen, you actually have a lot of things you can choose from. When I first looked at this, it was at the bottom, and I was thinking, what does FTP Aus Mil Art Siri mean? Turns out that's just region code. So you scroll up, you can see it there. This is a US car, and we've got two versions for US. We have US, and you've got US Art. Art stands for automatisch something. It's basically the cruise control. So you want Art turned on. So let's go ahead and select that one, and you'll want to press F3. I've already done this, so I don't really need to do it again, and apply that coding to the engine. You also want the engine to be running while you do this, otherwise it won't stick. So effectively, one of the first things you want to do when you start setting this stuff up is to select this variation, or the correct variant for your car, from the V220, or if you got a CL, be a C215, or really depending on what body you have. You just need to choose the right engine variant that has ART in it. Otherwise nothing will work. So I'll just pretend that I applied that. We'll go back. Once you've applied that, you'll go through a whole other sequence. You'll want to go to the implicit coding for ME27, and it will read all the values. Again, it's kind of lying. It doesn't really read them. It read them earlier when I did that big bulk read. But we'll go ahead and see what it pulls up. Again, it'll say something's invalid. It's kind of a lie. I'm sure there's something invalid, but I don't know which it is. So if we scroll down here, the other thing you want to select when you're setting things up is going to be under, let's see, where's it at? Bandinde. You basically want to turn off the built-in cruise control, because you don't really need 2 cruise controls in a system. So right here where it says Tempomat, that's the built-in cruise control in the ECU. You want to say aus, means it's removed rather than installed. That basically tells it to ignore the built-in cruise control. You also want to press F3 and apply this change as well. On other cars, this is called something else. It might have ART in the string. This car is early enough that they just didn't bother making the string say ART, so we'll just say that's good enough. So those are the 2 main sticking points when it comes that I ran into coding this engine, because no one really ever mentioned that these things were required. I just basically went through trial and error to set it up. Once you've applied that, everything else is pretty easy. If the other things, of course, you'll need to set up will be in your chassis. Actually, you don't really need to do anything under chassis, if I recall correctly, but you will need to do something under body. You need to go to EZS, which is kind of like CGW, or CGW, yeah. And you'll need to turn on Distronic there. Sometimes people say that you need to set it up in CGW, but in this particular case you need to go to EZS instead. And this will also be under development data. Control unit adaptations. And in this one you can just go straight into variant coding. I know it's kind of an inconsistent interface, and just select var code description. And the particular piece of German that you're looking for here is going to be called, let's see if we can find it. It's so all over the place. Let's see. There we go. We want the Abstand Regel Tempomat, and you want to put that as vorhanden, which means installed. So there we go. So you turn that one on, and that basically allows everything else to talk to that guy. If you do not set that up, you'll not actually be able to communicate with the unit properly. If you don't set the engine ECU up, you'll get ESP errors, you'll get brake assist warning errors, and you'll get a bunch of errors from the DTR system itself, where it will say that it can't communicate properly over the CAN bus. It'll say there's an internal fault and all that kind of stuff. So basically what's happening is the engine is seeing messages on the CAN bus it doesn't expect. The ESP and brake assist, they're all seeing messages too, and so they're kind of freaking out and disabling themselves. You basically have to tell everyone, hey, it's cool, these messages are expected, by turning on ART, and that allows them all to be happy on the same CAN bus. So you can see here I've got a pretty happy system. There's no fault codes showing up in DTR. You can of course do some other interesting stuff too. You can look at actual values and see if the DTR system is working. If we go into like DTR status or object recognition, you can sort of play around with it and see what it actually sees through the radar sensor, which is kind of a fun thing. Go back. Let's see, what else can you do? Other guides will say you need to run initial startup. You definitely do need to do that as well. Basically when you install the unit in the first place. Something that I've got to do that I haven't done yet is coding in the upper control panel to support the switches. You see here I've actually got the switches out of the car. I don't have them installed yet because it turned out this car from 00 to 02 requires a very specific wiring harness, and so I I followed W220.EE's recommendation and bought what they call the minor harness. I'll show you where that's at in a second. You can tell it's not hooked up because if I go to, I believe, information and communication, nope, that's not it. Go back. Maybe it's under body. Yeah, upper control panel. And if we look inside of that, you'll see there's a fault code right now. Let's pop it open real quick. Sometimes these systems take a little bit longer to talk to than others. Make sure I'm still connected. Yeah. Well, that doesn't seem to want to load right now, so maybe I'll go ahead and splice something in for that later. But basically what it will be complaining about is that it can't read the potentiometer switch. So as a word of caution, if you have these old 2000 to 2001 pre-facelift switches, the normal harness to connect it to the switches down here is not going to work. There's only 6 pins for the connectors under here. I actually took this wood off to take a look and actually read the model number because it's written on the top of this thing. So what you actually end up having to do is getting an older version of the cable. If you look at the electronic parts guide, you should be able to find the right cable. It's a little bit misleading because mostly it directs you in the point, directs you to the newer cable almost all the time, and so it's difficult to find the reference to the old cable. What I ended up doing was just putting in a fake car into the part system and twiddling with it until I found the right one. So anyway, we got upper control panel to load, and here you can see if I look at stored faults, you can see it says that the voltage supply to the DTR potentiometer is faulty. So I'm going to wait until I get that, test everything out and button everything up. But as you can see here, kind of in summary, it's not that hard to connect Distronic into a 2001-2000 car, W220 chassis. The catches are, of course, almost everything is a little bit different than all the other cars, so you'll need to perhaps experiment a little bit. Make sure you update the ME to the right version, and everything should come along pretty nicely. But you can see here, I got the cool Distronic display, and everything looks like it's working okay, at least in theory. At least there's no error codes. We'll test it out later. That's all for now.